Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, we are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another episode, guys. In today's episode, we are going to discuss questions that the Indianapolis Colts did and did not answer in 2024. It's a video we do around this time every single year, so let's jump right into it, Derek. And I will say, with the season ending the way it did and playing out the way it did, there are going to be more questions the Colts did not answer as opposed to questions they did answer. So let's start with the did and go into the did not since there are more. Let's jump in first to the offense. So, Derek, when you're looking at this Colts offense, there were definitely a few guys on this offense that proved they can be playmakers, right? You have Jonathan Taylor, who, despite having some issues due to injuries, he proved that he still is one of the best backs in the NFL. You obviously saw what he did during the final couple games of the season where he just took it up to another level. You saw wide receiver. You saw the emergence of Alec Pierce taking it to another level. He led the NFL in yards per catch. You saw Josh Downs continue to be very, very good. And, Michael Pittman Jr., to his credit, I know he definitely did not have the season that we all expected due to that injury and some inconsistent play. And he also had a fault in that as well. But I did think Michael Pittman, kind of towards the end of the season started playing better for the Colts, despite working through that serious back injury and questions about should he have played or not. Doesn't matter. He played through it, and I give him credit for that. So, yeah, I do think overall, Derek, there definitely were some pieces on this offense that made you think, okay, there's some young guys that we can work with here.
Yeah, no doubt that there were times this season when the weapons just really failed the Indianapolis Colts, in particular Anthony Richardson, in a lot of ways. But again, there were some weapons that you can hang your hat on. Josh Downs has the second most catches in his first two seasons of any player in Indianapolis Colts history, only behind the great Marvin Harrison, right? So that demonstrates a lot. Alec Pierce this year elevated his game. He led the NFL in yards per catch this season with the limited action that he did get. And so obviously Jonathan Taylor as well, when he's healthy, he is elite. He's one of the best running backs in the league when he is currently on the field. So a big play is always able to happen with him. So yeah, there definitely is some weapons here that Indianapolis can work with. You just got to hope that the remainder of the weapons and the people running the offense are able to also work with that.
Yeah, and to that with the offense, what the Colts did in the draft, for some people, we were a little bit, we questioned it a little bit when it came to the offensive line investment in the third and fourth round, but it actually ended up working out in their favor in a lot of ways because Ryan Kelly missed a good chunk of the season, and then Braden Smith had a personal issue, and so he missed a good chunk of the season as well. So both guys that you drafted in round 3 and 4, respectively, both saw a lot of action at tackle and center. And I think looking forward into that position, you got a glimpse and maybe feel better about your future at those positions by addressing it the way that you addressed it. And so the strategy of bringing in those offensive linemen, while definitely head scratching for certain people at that point in time, you look at it now and you say that was a wise investment for the Colts to do that back-to-back rounds. What were your thoughts on the offensive line, the young guys, Bordolini and Gonzalez, and kind of how they performed and, some of the questions about those picks and how the Colts answered them well?
Well, the last few years, Cody, we've seen the Indianapolis Colts offensive line go through some injury struggles, right? In 2021, it was, the left tackle position and even the right guard position. In 2022, we saw the same thing, right? And 2023, thank goodness, the offensive line was healthy for the majority of the time. But, the 3 out of the last 4 years, this offensive line has had several times where injuries just, and even in 2023 last year, the one injury that we did have continuously happening with Braden Smith, it cost the Indianapolis Colts a lot. But this was the first time in a while where the Indianapolis Colts offensive line, when it had injury problems, you had seemingly had the answers to the injury problems. And if you can actually draft and get free agents in the building that can efficiently take over for guys that and fill in, and not just fill in, but also like battle on behalf of that, you did a great job of getting those pieces. And, guys like Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonsalves, again, you never want to, unless they're a high-end rookie, and even so, as a high-end rookie being taken early in the first round, even then there's still some grace period that needs to be, given to all of these rookie players, right? But for them to come in and not only do well, but just do well in spite of everything and not being high draft picks. I mean, it really is a testament to just how well they've done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And moving on to really talking about some of these young players off of that, the Colts did very, very much on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the secondary, decide to go with the youth movement. They decided to double down and invest in a lot of their young draft picks from 2023 and 2022. And yes, it was kind of mixed, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think the positive thing you did see out of that, Derek, was the development of two young guys from 2022 and 2023. Talking, of course, about Nick Cross and Jalen Jones. And while I'm not saying they're, all pro type of players, you did see those guys, I think, take a pretty significant leap in years 2 and 3. And I think you feel comfortable enough with those two players, as starters longer term with your roster, and answering and filling a few of those holes that you've had on your defense in recent years. And again, both these guys, they're still very young. I think what, Jalen Jones was 21 and Nick Cross was 20 when he was drafted. So they're still very young at this point, and they're still growing as players. But you definitely do feel like, even though the youth movement had mixed results, you got some answers from a couple of your young guys that you had question marks about.
Yeah, no doubt. Jalen Jones, has been a model of consistency. I don't know what his ceiling is. I don't think it's much higher than what it is now. But even saying that, still not a terrible option for you in your cornerback room. Also, when it comes to Nick Cross, you're right. I mean, there were so many things where we were talking about it last year, Cody. We thought Nick Cross was going to be the Achilles heel of this defense, when in actuality, he was one of the best players on the defense through the entirety of the year, which it speaks volumes to Nick Cross finally taking advantage of his opportunity and what he's been able to provide for you. So it has been nice to see these two young guys step up and do that, because Lord knows, you're looking for those guys to be able to do it right now, because you don't have a lot of that on this defense at the moment.
No, you do not. That is for sure. And that leads us into talking about some of the negative things here, Derek. And I think we can just stay here on the defense. I mean, there was a lot of questions with this defense, and I think this defense proved in a lot of ways that 2023 wasn't a fluke, Derek. 2023 wasn't a fluke. The defense was not good in 2022. It was even worse in 2024. I mean, all the things from the missed tackles, the yards allowed, the lack of sacks. I mean, everything on the defense was pretty bad. And you had a lot of guys who really took steps back on this defense, and it just felt like this defense as a whole was a major liability all year long. They had a couple games where they looked decent, like they kept you in some games, but then for the majority of the season, they just couldn't do anything. They couldn't tackle, couldn't cover, and then the scheme was terrible. It was just all bad for this defense in 2024. So what were your thoughts on just the issues the Colts had, and the idea that, 2023 wasn't a fluke. This defense is bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where it's like, do you question if they did answer what a lot of Colts fans were wondering, was that, this defense really does have a lot of ways to go about it. Again, it's not just, one or two guys that are messing up, or even just the fact that there's quite a few guys that need to be upgraded. It's the fact that, you've had several defensive captains come out and express some disinterest from not just from the whole team, but like in particular defensive players. We've seen that there's been some guys on defense where, again, we won't mention their names because everybody already knows who they are. Guys that seem more interested in stuff off the field than what's actually going on the field, right? Or they only care about certain things on the field that benefits them and not really about the team. So, it definitely is a shock, and it's something that the Indianapolis Colts are going to have to get over. And you certainly hope that this new defensive coaching staff is going to, be able to fine tune these things and get this defense to a more appropriate state in 2025.
I mean, it got your defensive coordinator fired, if that tells you anything about how bad this defense was in 2024. And that kind of leads into some of the other points when it comes to a kind of philosophy the Colts had this last year. I mentioned the youth movement a little bit ago, but the idea that we like our guys. The Colts, we saw what they did. They doubled down, Derek. They didn't sign really anybody of note in free agency in 2024. Raekwon Davis was the only outside free agent signing on defense. That was it. So the Colts were very adamant that they were going to add these guys, and it was going to be the difference. And the defense would be just fine. And the team would be just fine. And we saw very clearly, Derek, that wasn't the case at all. So this idea that we like our guys, we only have to worry about our guys. If we just focus on our guys, we're going to be good, and we're going to be good enough. We're this close. That leads me to my next one as well. I won't get to that yet. But the idea of we like our guys, we're going to double down on our guys, I mean, it blew up in the Colts' face. Surprise, surprise, it blew up in the Colts' face because of the ego of their GM.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, just like how, Ballard said that, I thought if I gave these guys, their contracts that they wanted, I thought that they would play harder. Isn't that just a little bit childish, Cody? Like, how are you so blind to that? Like, every regular NFL fan, or even fans in general of sports, particularly in the NFL, when's the last time that you saw a player get the big contract that they got, and then they were not only able to follow up that contract with good numbers, but numbers that eclipsed anything they did to get to that point? So, I mean, the fact that you thought that re-signing all of these guys was going to make the difference, and you thought every single one of them is going to play harder, I mean, I don't know. I don't know, man. And, again, the whole we like our guys. Ballard even saying afterwards that it was my fault and it was the wrong decision to, be running it back with the same unit again. And, I mean, you're right, man. It wasn't the right move. And you set this team back a year because of it. You left it all in the hands of your pretty much rookie quarterback to figure it out, and you hoped that these guys would get better. And not only did you hope they get better, but you didn't have the right coaching staff in there to make them get better. That was the problem. Guys don't just get better because they have a year's worth of experience more in the NFL. A lot of guys do, but not every player just gets better just because they're more experienced. You have to have experience with coaches that know how to develop people to be able to make them better. And you didn't have that because obviously you just fired half your defensive staff to replace some new ones, and a lot of other things happened there. And so that's definitely an issue. And the whole we like our guys motto, until Ballard makes some harsh decisions and, starts putting new guys over his existing guys, that motto ain't going to leave him.
I was going to say, like, you look at his guys. His guys were one of the worst defenses in the NFL last year. I mean, really. They were his guys. I mean, you're in year 9 now. These are your guys. They've been your guys. So you have no excuses. You can't say, "Oh, it was the previous guy." It was his guys. How many coaches can you fire until you finally admit, "Okay, maybe I'm not that good of a GM." Like honestly, it's your guys and you say we like our guys, and if you're outright refusing to add proven talent in there, you're going to get what's coming to you. And I hate to say it, Derek, but you're going to continue to say the words "I failed" multiple times every single year because that's just what it's been. And that's what's so frustrating is Ballard has said that multiple times, but it hasn't changed that much. And he's has such a hard head. It's so frustrating that he is so stubborn. And he has admitted that, right? He is so stubborn and so set in his ways. It's just infuriating. And, even though they've said all these things about how we need to do this stuff with free agents, I think this is why you and I and a lot of Colts fans are like, yeah, bull crap until you do it. We're not going to believe the word you say because you've been selling this crap for years. You've been selling it. But the one thing I'll give Chris Ballard, the one thing I'll give him is he did not say the phrase that I think would have made Colts Nation go to West 56th Street and riot. We're close. They said that last year in 2024. We're close. We're this close. We were a drop pass away from, winning and beating the Texans and getting into the playoffs. Okay. But your defense still was not good in 2024. You have essentially a rookie quarterback. You have questions on your roster. The team run it back, Derek, was the stupidest thing the Colts could have done. And they did it. And you doubled down. Your defense got worse. Your rookie quarterback, your young quarterback, I should say, he didn't take the steps you need him to take, which we'll get to it in a second. There was a lot of issues with this team. And the idea of we're close was never a reality, Derek. And the Colts sold us, a lot of people, on the fact that we're close, when in reality they were not.
As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Yeah, I mean, you could just look at all these playoff teams and realize the Indianapolis Colts are not close. And, and that is the one thing. You're right. It's good that Chris Ballard did not mention that phrase. He even actually said the opposite, that, we're not close. And, it's all the more frustrating, Cody, because literally a week prior to that, or 2 weeks prior to that, your head coach, Shane Steichen, is telling people after you just beat the Jacksonville Jaguars at home to finish 8-9 on the year, he's sitting there saying, we're actually really close. I really feel that. Like, dude, we have heard this line for years. We know you guys aren't. And, it sucks that they did not answer that question of being close. It felt like in 2023, this team was close. It did feel like they were close. They were literally a few plays away, Cody, from winning the division for the first time in a decade and making the playoffs for the first time in years. And, sitting there and saying, oh man, we actually legit look close. Like we're at least competing with all these teams. Just one or two more things got to go our way. And, one or two things didn't go our way. It actually felt like 3 or 4 things went the wrong way for us. So, yeah, it sucks that we're not close, that didn't get answered. And the fact that, we're so far behind the rock right now, I don't know what all needs to be done to get it fixed, but it sure feels like a lot.
Well, here's the thing, Derek. Both statements can be true. Were the Colts close to making the playoffs in 2023? Yes. There was a couple plays that could have gone their way, but they didn't. But that is no excuse for the Colts to do what they did last offseason. That's no excuse to ignore the clear and obvious flaws in this roster, to be so arrogant to say, we don't need to do anything. Our roster is a playoff level roster. Going back to, Derek, the idea of we like our guys, I mean, Derek, things change at the NFL level. We saw it this year. Things change all the time. I mean, you're going to have seasons where a guy plays really well for you one year, and then the next year he either gets hurt or doesn't play well. It happens all the time. And I think also going back to the depth thing, we haven't really talked about it as well, but I think that's kind of implied within that, is the fact that you didn't have any depth anywhere, except really the offensive line. That was about it. And so as a result, when guys got injured, you're relying on waiver claims to come out and start for you on defense. And as good as Samuel Womack was, Derek, you got lucky. You really got lucky. It could have been far worse. Far worse. So that approach was just, yes, you can say we were close, but that doesn't mean we're going to be done and we're going to sit on our laurels like the Colts did. And that was just a huge mistake, a massive mistake by them. And we've seen the result of that. You cannot rely year to year on things to be exactly the same because they are not going to be. It's just reality. So anyway, continuing on, let's talk about some other things the Colts didn't do well, because that's just a little bit about what the Colts didn't do well. Got to start with the franchise quarterback, Anthony Richardson. Derek, as much as we still think he has the talent, he did not look like an NFL quarterback in 2024. Plain and simple, black and white, he did not. He couldn't make basic throws. He was inaccurate. He couldn't stay healthy. There were character concerns as far as work ethic goes. There was a lot of issues with Anthony Richardson in 2024. And Derek, at this point, this is it for him. This is it for him. You can only defend this kid for a certain amount of time. There's only a certain amount of grace period until you look at it and say, look, this kid's been injured. And when he was on the field, he wasn't that great. Yes, there were other factors, but bottom line is Anthony Richardson through 2 years has not looked like the franchise future quarterback for the Colts. He hasn't.
Yeah.
And that's why we've seen him go to Chris Hess and try to fix his accuracy issue, because it was a big issue last year. Now, to say that, there were some positive steps late in the season. He did do some things. He did after he got benched and he came back. To his credit, I think he looked better. Still was not to the level he needed to be a true franchise quarterback. And then obviously the way the season ended with him being injured, that added more fuel to the fire about, I don't know if he's going to be the guy or not. So there's a lot of questions with Anthony Richardson, but I will say this, he, to me, and to a lot of fans, did not inspire confidence that he can be the guy.
Yeah, so obviously, at the end of 2023, everybody looked at it and obviously had the season-ending injury. But there was moments where you're like, okay, there's some pieces here that could work for this. And then you're thinking, okay, he's gonna have a full off season in 2024. Sure, it's coming back from that shoulder, whatever. But he's gonna be throwing. They said he was throwing in February, and by April he was throwing it at almost full strength and all this other stuff. And he had that whole off season where he was sitting on the bench mentally preparing, because that's what everyone told us was that all he needed was the mental reps and he was going to get better. And you're right, in 2024 he was not better. He looked confused. He looked like he was out of sorts. He was incapable of hitting a pass within 10 yards of him. And it was very concerning. And for the good things that we did see from Anthony Richardson this year, there were some good things, especially at the end of the year after he got benched. And that's another thing too, the whole he got benched because people were saying he didn't know how to be a pro. And Pat McAfee then mentioned it again, like, how's he supposed to be a pro if there's not a pro in that locker room that knowing how to work with him and teach him what it's like to be a pro, right? So it felt like a ginormous step back in a lot of ways because, Cody, we said it even then in the middle of the season that, we're going to give Anthony Richardson the benefit of the doubt. We have to give him at least another year to be able to see what we have going for him because, again, he's only 22 years old. He's still younger than half the quarterbacks, Cody, that are going to be taken in the draft this year. It's crazy. He's been in the league now. He's about to come into his third year in the league, and yet will still have less experience than most of the experienced quarterbacks that are going to get taken in the draft this year. So again, this is a guy that just has virtually no experience and had no meaningful experience in college when it came to this stuff. So you have to give him the benefit of the doubt, at least right now. Now, obviously, he's taking steps to try to improve his throwing motion and be able to understand things. My concern, Cody, is less about him being able to read a defense. It's less about that. It's more about his accuracy more than anything. But yeah, and then you now have the situation where everybody was talking about like, hey, is he fully committed to this? I have no doubt that he loves football, and I have no doubt that he wants to be a good quarterback. But, is he fully committed to being what an NFL quarterback entails? We're going to find out this next season, Cody, because if there's not drastic improvements from Anthony Richardson, because, again, in 2024, we weren't expecting him to be a finished product, but we're certainly looking for him to, at least look like a serviceable quarterback. And for a good chunk of last year, it didn't seem like he was. And that's the unfortunate part. And this year, we need him to look like a serviceable quarterback. If he doesn't at least look like a serviceable quarterback this year, then this whole thing might go up in flames after 2025.
And if he doesn't stay healthy, also, you can't rely on him to be your guy. If he's going to be hurt in a good chunk of the season, you can't rely on him long term. And I hate that because he's, like you said, he's so young. He's teeming with potential. But Derek, there's got to be a line you draw at some point where you say he's got to either be the guy or not. And again, quarterbacks everywhere. Like, you see different quarterbacks that don't work out certain places that figure it out other places. But for the Indianapolis Colts and some of the people right in charge right now, this season's it for a lot of these guys, right? If Anthony Richardson fails, I think the whole ship goes down. It has to. Right? You can't give him another year. You can't ride this another year. I mean, we're even shocked that you kept everybody around this year. You certainly can't sell the fans anymore on next year. There would be no reason if Anthony Richardson fails, if he's either not healthy or if he's just not good, there's no way you can sell the fans again to, look for him to improve more. You just can't at that point because you've already given him. Now, this will be year 3 for him. And if you haven't noticed any sort of positive steps, it's hard. It's going to be really hard to justify that. It's going to be really difficult to do that. So that's what we look at when we look at Anthony Richardson. And I think the final thing, Derek, or one of the couple things here when it comes to it is I think you need some more playmakers on this offense. You talked about there was a couple guys, Jonathan Taylor, some of the receivers, especially at tight end, Derek. It was very obvious this group was an absolute garbage fire. It was really bad. I mean, there was nobody on this tight end room that you felt confident in. And I guess if there was anybody, probably Mo Alley Cox, who's past 30 and has been here forever and is really just nothing more than a glorified blocking tight end at this point. Doesn't really do a whole lot in the receiving game. He might have a game where he catches a couple passes, but that's about it. And if that is your best tight end, yeah, you got to make a major overhaul on this unit. No doubt about that. And even another running back, I think, as well. That was something where the Colts kind of went with the we like our guys thing. They had opportunities to improve that running back position. They chose to rely on Trey Sermon. Did not work out at all. And they're going to be looking for a running back this year, and they better add one or else I don't know what they're doing. But yeah, just in terms of some playmakers, even though they have some, it definitely feels like they're still lacking in some key areas here, specifically at tight end.
Yeah, I mean, and the playmaking ability doesn't just end on, just doesn't end on the offense. Again, we're looking for a guy on the defense as well that's going to be that turnover machine. We had that with Darius Leonard when he was an Indianapolis Colt before his injuries. A guy that would consistently be forcing turnovers. You don't really have that specific guy on your defense either at this point. Julian Blackmon has tried to be, and Julian Blackmon, for the most part, hasn't been too terrible at it. But outside of that, you don't really get a ton of other turnovers from a lot of your other players that you have. And you're right. When it comes to the offense, I mean, you do have a few players on the offense that'll make those plays, but you're right. The tight end group, it's drastically terrible. And again, that was a position that everyone said, we don't trust it. And Chris Ballard was like, no, we like our guys. We like our guys. We know that they're going to improve. We know they're going to be good. And they didn't. They sucked. They all sucked. They all got injured. They all sucked. So, I mean, it's the fans are seeing and understanding the problem more than Chris Ballard. And that is what's frustrating because we all told you that there's not a single tight end on this group that is going to make a name for themselves and be a legit, real NFL quality high-end tight end. And he just laughed in our faces and said, no, it's not true. So, again, you hope that Chris Ballard learned his lesson, but again, after, spending the last few years, him telling us how stupid we are, I'd like to think that I'm going to reserve my judgment until it actually comes about that he actually is going to take the steps to get better.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, tight end, we thought Jelani Woods could be that guy, but I mean, the reality is he hadn't played in over a year at that point, and now it's going to be 2 years of any meaningful football. So you can't rely on him to be the guy. You really don't have anybody else on this tight end room that you feel any ounce of confidence in being the guy moving forward. So, yeah, it's got to be a big priority, probably the number one priority on offense, no doubt about that. And then the final thing, Derek, that we can kind of touch on here is the play calling issues. There were definitely some play calling issues from Shane Steichen a year ago. I mean, you saw sometimes where Colts offense, when they were on, they were on. When they were off, man, it was ugly. There were some not good moments from this Colts offense. Again, Anthony Richardson certainly plays a factor into this. Some of the lack of different playmakers definitely factors into it as well. But there was definitely, I think, from Shane Steichen's standpoint, he took a step back. He regressed a little bit when it came to calling plays for the Colts. And that's led to some people saying, I think he should give up play calling to, Jim Bob Cooter and just focus on being kind of the CEO type of guy and more focus on the team building aspect of it. But what were your thoughts on Shane Steichen and the play calling and some of the issues the Colts had on offense?
I think there was a major step back in play calling this year. And, I feel like was one of the reasons why Anthony Richardson, especially early in the year, was having so many difficulties with doing anything that we resembled of him in 2023. Was it felt like Shane Steichen was trying to go away from Anthony Richardson's identity, and it felt like he was trying to turn him into a pocket passer when we're like, yeah, of course you have to throw passes from in the pocket. We're not suggesting that he doesn't, but it felt like there was no designed runs virtually for him. There was like no play action. There was no other there was nothing that allowed Anthony Richardson to utilize a strength that he had, his running, to utilize in helping the offense. It felt like he had to be prime Peyton Manning back there in order to be able to do stuff. And then on top of it, when, he did run the offense, half the time there was guys dropping passes. And then the other half of the time, Cody, it felt like it was either a 50-yard bomb or there was nothing when it came to the play calling. So, again, it wasn't just also trying to turn him into a pocket passer, but it didn't feel like there was enough different route concepts for him to be able to grasp onto and have a safety blanket for. It felt like there was a ton of deep shots, and they were hoping it was either deep shot or there was nothing there. So you had to be better for him to be able to make him a better quarterback because he's still learning. You have to be able to give him that out. You have to be able to give him the opportunity to make the easy throw, when in actuality, sure, there were times he could have made the easy throw, but sometimes there weren't easy throws to make because there was no option for that. It was either 30, 40 yards down the field and the two routes that were being ran were covered, and then you just had to make it up as you went along. Like, good luck. Like, that's not a offensive game plan that's going to win with Anthony Richardson. That's not even a game plan that the Chiefs run. And the Chiefs are the best offense that we've ever seen. They don't run with having two tight end sets off play action and only send Travis Kelce and one other person and just expect that those guys will get open somehow. They don't do that. There's more widespread stuff. You got to get better with that sort of thing. And it was a major step back for Shane Steichen. And you're right. It felt like Shane Steichen failed to grasp the whole team, and he was just trying to keep his play calling. And we had that issue with the previous coach before him. He should probably consider giving up play calling and just being a head coach, because there's only a few guys in the NFL that are smart enough and capable enough to be able to do play calling and entrust that their coordinators are going to do the job that they need to do to allow them to do such a thing. So Shane Steichen lost a lot of hope, Cody, from a lot of Colts fans. 2023, very high on him. 2024, very low on him. The great thing is, this team, from top to bottom, is at an all-time low right now for morale. Can't really go too much lower than what you're at right now. It feels like the best direction you're able to go is up from here.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think you touched on it. Just some of the scheming and stuff was just very questionable at times. And, when you have a young quarterback who is struggling, why not make life easy on him? And it felt like the Colts didn't do that at times. So, yeah, to his credit, I do think the offense did become a little bit easier for Anthony Richardson. He did kind of design a little bit better, I think, as the season went on. His play design, all that stuff got a little bit better. But you're right. I mean, he's got to just consider all those things from a play calling standpoint. And there's only a handful of guys, like you said, who can do it. And Shane kind of showed he might be a little bit over his head trying to do both. I mean, there are guys who are great coordinators and there are guys who are great head coaches. And the difference is, Derek, you can balance those things. And frankly, I don't think Steichen could balance those things. He showed he couldn't do that in 2024. So definitely something to consider there. But yeah, guys, that'll do it for this one. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. What are your thoughts here on the things the Colts did and did not answer in 2024? And what are you looking for them to do in 2025? Let us know all those things in the comments down below. But guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much. And as always, go Colts.